Hey, it's Russo for Livia Weight Control Centers. The weather has been spring-like virtually all winter long, but it's about to get even better. So get spring ready the Livia way and lose up to 10 pounds in your first 2 weeks. I joined Livia back in December, and I'm already down 25 pounds because of the personalized and doctor-recommended program tailored to my unique needs, goals, and lifestyle. I was there Monday, and I told their amazing team of registered dietitians and nutritionists about this week's trip to Arizona and Colorado and my upcoming one to the GM's meetings in South Florida. They guided me through every step of the way with tools and tips and motivation about how I can continue to succeed. And if you join Livia today, you'll get your first 3 months free. Plus, Livia is now offering breakthrough weight loss medications at their center locations. The medical weight loss program has been the perfect thing to complement the work I'm doing on the nutrition side of my journey. It's amazing how it helps decrease my appetite during my sometimes 20-hour days of late nights and early flights. Join Livia today and get your first 3 months free. Visit Livia.com, that's Livea.com, or call 855-GO-LIVIA. Plus, make sure to tell them Russo sent you, and they'll get you all set up. And don't forget to ask about their breakthrough weight loss medication options. Visit Livia.com or call 855-GO-LIVIA. Start your weight loss journey today and get spring ready the Livia way. Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from, believe it or not, a rainy Tempe, Arizona. I didn't even know it. Did you know it rained in Arizona?
Yes, only because the last time we were here was the week after the Phoenix Open.
Oh, okay.
And the Waste Management Open, it rained and was windy and cold that whole tournament. In fact, they had delays. The tournament almost got upended because of the bad weather. We were here the next week and it wasn't as bad. It was sunny but just not typical Phoenix area temperatures in terms of warmth. So I said the same thing when we were coming last time. Like, I didn't realize they had rainstorms in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. It was bad the week before we were down here last. And
yeah.
So today it just is a little bit fitting for what our season has been. Anybody could be getting traded right now. When you think about our season this year, we've had 0 great weather trips. The one trip we went to Florida was back-to-backs. It was cloudy, rainy, and windy in both Tampa and South Florida. We haven't been out to California. The trip to Dallas, the weather wasn't great. When we were down here last, the weather wasn't great. It's just been one of those years where we haven't had the little break in the schedule with some great weather cities.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And we'll see it's supposed to be terrible in Denver tomorrow as well. So our next live show, by the way, is March 13th at Splitrocks. Hopefully you all come on up to that awesome venue. You can grab dinner, grain belt special, usually a cheeseburger, fries, and a pint of grain belt in a Worst Seats in the House glass for $12.99. And then you'll have Anthony and me there, put it on a show as usual. The big news today has been long anticipated. Brandon Duhaime traded to the Colorado Avalanche for a 2026 third-round pick. We'll talk about all the scuttlebutt around this. Obviously, Joe Smith and I at The Athletic have been forecasting Duhaime being traded for about 3 weeks now. In my mailbag the other day, I wrote point blank, how great would he look in a New York Rangers, Colorado Avalanche, or Tampa Bay Lightning uniform. I don't just make I think people that read me by now know that if I'm putting that, I know the team is after him, and I think he's a perfect fit for the fourth line for the Colorado Avalanche. And Logan O'Connor's hurt. They've made a bunch of moves to try to load up and compete with a Vegas Golden Knights team and a Dallas Stars team. They're going to be a definite cup contenders coming out of this conference. And Dewy gets, the last time the Wild traded a player to Colorado, it was Nico Sturm, and we know what happened there. He won a Stanley Cup, Anthony.
Yeah, we can get into the other side of the trade and how it affects Colorado. They were really aggressive and went and got Yakov Trenin as well from Nashville to try to get a little sturdier in the bottom
scored
six.
Against the Wild the other night, didn't he?
Yeah, and it makes them a more rigid team to play against, and they need to try. The arms race in the West is legit right now with Edmonton loading up. Vegas, once again, abusing the salary cap system to go over by millions and millions and adding players left and right.
And they're not done.
And they're not. And Dallas added Tanev to their back end to a team that already I thought was one of the better in the West. So the arms race at the top end is legit. For Minnesota, this was, I know you kept talking about that that you thought it was imminent that they would trade not only Duhaime, but also Dewar. And to me,
and he's not safe.
Yeah. And I don't know. And Brandon Duhaime was not going to be a part of the long-term future in Minnesota without a doubt. They ended up getting a 3 a couple of years down the road. It makes some sense now when you and I were just guessing at, well, what would you get for Duhaime? And I said, well, if you can get a 2, it's a no-brainer. If you can get a 3, I'm not sure. And 4, I wouldn't have traded him. I would have just kept him and said, let's let her rip for the rest of the season. And so you get an idea that that's probably about what the tipping point was, because in order to get a 3, it had to be a couple of years down the road.
Well, I will say this, the Wild, what I had heard is that they were, if it was going to be a 3rd, they were trying to get a player. I think the player was Riley Tufte. But for this to happen, I think that the pick needed to be earlier. Colorado has basically said they didn't want to trade Tufte. I think what made this really appealing for Bill Guerin is they got so many prospects coming in the next couple of years that you sort of push that 3rd round pick off a couple of years and add it to when you're going to start needing to sort of maybe replenish some prospects. Colorado, they just added Casey Middlestat. They just added Sean Walker, and obviously Dewey's going to go there. We know what he brings. He brings speed. He brings physicality. He doesn't add offense. He's gotten 47 games in a row without a goal. So naturally, he'll probably score against the Wild.
Yeah, and that'll be the interesting part, because he was really a well-liked player inside the room.
Big time.
And you hate to see the player. He didn't want to go. The players didn't want to see him go. Some of the guys that I talked to today were, the statements they were making were pretty pointed with that, hey, we put Bill Guerin in this spot to have to trade away players instead of acquire players. I asked John Hines about what it's like to try to present to the team that, hey, we just traded away a player and got a draft pick in return. And then at the same time, hey, guys, dig in. We're in the trenches together. Let's keep going and make a run at this. Not that Brandon Duhaime is an irreplaceable part in this lineup, without a doubt. In fact, we'll see. Maybe Adam Beckman ends up being every bit the player that Duhaime is. But Duhaime was a guy they didn't want to lose. The players didn't want to lose him. Coaching staff didn't want to lose him. They liked him. They could trust him. They knew what they were going to get from him. I guess if you're just looking at it on the ice, a team that's already lacking for size, strength, grit with Foligno and Maroon on the sideline. Now it sounds like Foligno will be back soon, but without those guys in your lineup, now you lose maybe your best remaining physical presence in Duhaime, and you replace him with Beckman, who plays a hard game, but he doesn't have the.
I hope he gets. I don't see how, but I hope unless there's more trades, I don't see how he's going to get a lot of time in the lineup, unless there's injuries. But I would like to see him score, because I think he could add some offense to that very depleted, offensively challenged Goudreau and Dewar line. But the reality is that Foligno told Sarah McClellan and me in the locker room tomorrow that he is playing in Colorado. So that all of a sudden takes somebody out of the lineup if nobody's hurt. And then the other thing is Huznadinov is going to be here on Friday and meet the team, probably practice Saturday. Could debut I don't know how much he's been skating, but could debut Sunday or Tuesday. Right. So,
and I would assume
Beckman needs to take advantage of this.
He does. And that's a conversation we've had so many times that when you get those opportunities, you just don't know how many there are. We talked about it when he was called up a couple of weeks ago and he wound up not playing, but he had been given the opportunity a year ago and he didn't do enough to force his way onto the roster, into the lineup on a regular basis. Well, he has to do that now. And I know we've talked a lot, and you always take the angle that, some of these guys being locked up are blocking the path for these prospects. Well, none of these prospect guys have come up and said, I'm going to play so well that I'm going to make it impossible for me to take me out of the lineup. And I think when you look at Beckman right now, if it is a one-game audition with those guys, with Foligno coming back tomorrow night, he's got to make an impact tonight, and he's got to show something that says, take Lucchini out of the lineup, take Lettieri out of the lineup, take Shaw out of the lineup, but not me. for tomorrow night.
Great point.
And that's what it's just that simple. That's the way this works when you're a bottom six, up and down AHL, NHL kind of player.
And I talked to him today. I think he is well aware of that, but he's been well aware of that before. And as you said, he's got to show it. I know that we've talked about this a lot. I talked to Bill Guerin yesterday again, and he's definitely starts to get uptight when I bring this subject up. But the way this season has gone, and the fact that they are in sell mode, and to the player's point, Foligno said it, that they all put him in this position to make trades. I asked him point blank again, do you regret re-signing these guys, at least all at once in a vacuum and not waiting? Because right now, the way the pricers are going, you could get a first for Hartman. You can get a first and more for Foligno. You can get a first for Zuccarello. To me, for an organization that I feel needs a bit of a roster reset, do you still agree with this premise? Like, it's not, again, the who. I get the who. I like all those players. I can see why he would want to do it. But you only get so many opportunities and kicks at the can to reset the roster. And the reality is that right now the perception is they're going to roll this thing back next year, only with older players that have also, again, shown that they're injury prone.
Well, the injury prone part is the unknown. I don't know that I would have thought at the time of the signing that Marcus Foligno is a guy I would say is an injury-prone guy.
Mm-hmm. But it's been a lot. He plays a hard brand of hockey.
He plays a hard brand, but this injury totally unrelated to a hard brand of hockey. So that would have been a non-factor for me. It would have been with Johansson, without a doubt. Yeah. And now the Johansson deal at the price point it was and coming off of the spring that he had, I didn't disagree with it at the time, and it was a short term. It's a 2-year deal, and that's fine.
I totally agree, and I can't second guess that because I wrote a column saying they needed to get it done.
Right, and the Hartman one is the one that's a little bit different for me, and that's only because of the fact that I really think, and this is 100% my opinion, I think that was driven a bit by the fact that they weren't certain what they had in Marco Rossi, and that this was a guy that gave them a little bit more of a sure bet in a top 6 forward role, at least for right now. The one part about it, and you and I are never in these negotiations. I know you had the article in The Athletic the other day about all the no move clauses, and it is absurd how many there are. But if that's what it takes to get some of these deals done, who knows? Maybe it had to. Maybe you could have, and the Wild were not in a spot where it could be, hey, we'll throw a little extra money into the deal instead of the no move clause. But I still don't look at it as that these guys are, I don't think this is a team in need of a roster reset and overhaul. I think it's just in need of a little injection. And that injection might start with Hustadinov. Mm-hmm. Having these guys signed doesn't block his path to the NHL. Mm-hmm. It doesn't block Liam Ogren's path to the NHL. It really doesn't. If you don't have these guys, you'd be replacing them with other guys at about this same point in their career right now. Next year, you'd be looking for a Ryan Hartman type player next year, a Marcus Foligno type player next year. Because if you look at, let's assume that what they have in Kaprizov, Eriksson, Boldy, Rossi, Hartman, Foligno, that's 6, Zuccarello, that's 7 kind of known commodities that would all be top 9 type forwards. Well, it's not like they've got 4 top 9 forwards coming in the pipeline that are all going to be knocking on the door next year. Mm-hmm. Maybe Hustadinov is one of them. Maybe Ogren is one of them. Maybe Yurov is one of them. But those are the type. All the other spots, these guys, Goudreau, Dewar, Shaw, Lucchini, Letteri, Beckman, these guys are all 4th line guys. Probably when you look at when is the team going to be ready to contend, that's the type of players those guys are going to be anyway. So I don't really think that you're looking at a roster that was in need of where you can't win with. I mean, of all those guys I just named, if they're all in your top, if those 7 guys are in your top 9, you wouldn't look at any one of them and say, well, you can't win with that guy in your top 9.
Yeah.
You can't win with Ryan Hartman in your top 9. You absolutely can.
Yeah.
Or Marcus Foligno in your top 9. Teams would love to have Marcus Foligno.
I know. Fitting into their mix. I guess that's my only thing is that we have seen a team here that has achieved nothing in the playoffs. And, there just comes a ceiling of how many times you can just come back with it.
But here's the only thing I'd say about that. And I was thinking about that this morning. If you look at the Wild in a couple eras, one was the pre-Parise Suter era, where they were happy to make the playoffs. because it just didn't happen as often as it didn't. They had the one run in 03, but that was about it. Then you have the Parise Suter era, where that roster was those two guys that brought legitimacy to the franchise, and that was that young core of Brodin, Coyle, Granlund, Niederreiter, Zucker, that group. And that team, I think, topped out. They were going to be a playoff team every year. They were going to be maybe a team that could get to the second round, but you never saw a team that was on the verge of being looked at as one of the teams to beat in the West. All of those guys were good NHL players, but none were superstars. They were all, and to say good doesn't make it, I don't want to make it sound like they were just okay. They were just good players, but none were superstars. None were game changers. And that was a roster that then had to be reset. And it turned over to now the roster that's Kaprizov, Boldy, Rossi, Faber. You're talking about guys that have the chance to be superstars. And so I think with this roster, this era, to say that they haven't achieved anything in the playoffs, this entire era has been playing with one hand tied behind your back with $14 million under the cap. Right. This year, 20 with Spurgeon on the sideline. And yet, if you had said when Parise and Suter were bought out, let's just assume that this year the Wild don't make the playoffs, and next year with this roster and a little bit better health, they're a playoff team that reaches but doesn't advance. If I had told you going into the Parise Suter buyout years that, okay, for 5 years you're going to be feeling major pain, but 4 of those 5 years you're going to still make the playoffs, would you have taken it?
Probably.
Absolutely. You would have said, well, anybody that can keep a team afloat and be a legitimate playoff team in those years. And I think this year's team's a legit playoff team if they hadn't had the unbelievable run of injuries that they had simultaneously in late December. And we'll see. Maybe they still make some kind of miracle run here late and make it valid. But I just think you're not looking at a roster that has maxed out like the previous group, I think, had with the Wild. Some of those guys have gone on to be really good players in roles on other teams, like Charlie Coyle, for example. I mean, he's a huge part of Boston's success right now, but he was never going to be a number one center, that kind of guy here. He wasn't going to be a guy who could carry the offense.
Right.
He was going to be a really good second line, third line type center, shutdown guy, a guy you'd love to have on your team. But now you've got Eriksson Ek. He's a legit first line center. You've got Kaprizov. He's a legit superstar winger. Matt Boldy looks like a superstar. Brock Faber looks like a superstar.
They better start showing Kaprizov an ability to win here in the next year. I'm just telling you. Like that contract negotiation is going to be very, very interesting. The quote, by the way, from Bill in today's Athletic was, I respect people's opinions and feelings, but I have to do what I think is right. And this is me talking, and that's not trading away those players. If you're rebuilding, that's what you do. We're not rebuilding. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but people don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. But I'm just telling you that you're either going to go with guys you know, or you're going to go out and spend a lot of money on people you don't know. That's scarier to me. But again, that's the situation that they are in. They are not willing to that's go with all young guys.
But that's almost exactly what I was just saying. If you don't have Hartman and Foligno, right, you're going to find another guy like him somewhere else because you don't have young guys that are ready. Or you can
commit to just filling those spots with young kids and letting them grow.
But who?
I'm just saying you're off Ogren. Like, let these guys play.
And I'm saying those guys will fit into what you already have here, because what you've got locked in is the guys I mentioned before, 7 guys that I think are top 9 forwards. Freddie Gaudreau, I think let's just say in an ideal world, he's your 4th line center that kills penalties, wins some draws, and is a shootout specialist. Maybe he's $500,000 a year too expensive for that, but that's what you got. You put a couple wingers on his line that are the rotating cast of the guys like Beckman, like Dewar, like Shaw, like Lucchini, like Lettieri, whoever happens to be playing well at the time. You put a couple of those guys with them. Well, now you got 2 spots left for the guys you're talking about. Ogren, Yurov, Hustadinov. Yep. They seem to be the only 3 that we're really talking about as close to NHL ready type guys.
Right. But there just comes a point where you need to, I'm not saying rebuild, but reset. That's what you think. Pittsburgh wants to trade Jake Gensel. You think that Calgary wants to trade Noah Hannafin, Elias Lindholm, Zadorov.
I don't. But if you let's go back to what you'd originally said, that like just give that spot to a young guy. So take Ryan Hartman out of your lineup. Say you've traded him this week because you didn't sign him to an extension with a no move clause. Who's the young guy that right now is being held down because he doesn't have that spot?
I'm just saying that you could start to. It's not. First of all, it's not 1 year. They have him for 3 more.
Right.
They have Foligno for 4
more. So even
more.
if it's for 3, but just say like, who's the guy right now that you think they're limiting his growth because he's not in that spot?
I'm saying that eventually you need to open up roster spots for these guys. Like Urov needs to be in your top 6. Huznadinov needs to be in your top 9. And I'm just saying
they can. So if with the 7 guys,
they just gave a 3-year, $4 million a year extension to a guy that is probably going to be your 4th line right wing maybe next year, who hasn't scored in 17 games. Like that's my point.
I still look at Hartman as a top 9 forward. This 2 years ago, this guy scored 34. Even last year in an injury riddled year, he was approaching 20. I think he's a 20 goal guy, and maybe he's your 3rd line right wing. Maybe your 3rd line has Hartman and Foligno on it with who knows who's the guy in the middle. But that's even if those guys are 3rd line guys, I'm still talking about top 9. You still have space for Urov, Hustadinov, and Ogren. Well, at least 2 of the 3 in your top 9. And that's assuming that everybody else is healthy, that Zuccarello's healthy, that Rossi's healthy, that Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson Ek are all playing. Well, if that's really what your group is, I think that's a group, and I think that's how Billy's looking at this.
You think it's a group that's going to win a cup?
I think it's
a group that's going to win a round. They haven't done it yet.
Yes. Well, they haven't, because this group hasn't gone in. That's my point I was just making.
I know this the whole 14.7
right. So this group hasn't gone into it yet. We don't know that this group can't win it yet if they're playing where they're playing on a level playing field with the other team. We don't know that for sure.
Right.
I think they are, because I think there are superstars in this group that there weren't in the previous group. There was no Kirill Kaprizov in that Coyle, Granlund, Niederreiter group. There was no Boldy in that group. Frankly, I don't know if there was a Rossi in that group. Maybe Granlund. He was maybe a similar type of guy, but you didn't have, Eriksson Ek, this is going to sound strange to say it, but Eriksson Ek right now, who is the top center in that group? Mikko Koivu. Would you take Eriksson Ek over him?
100%.
Yeah, but he's a better player. So this is a different core. And now if you start to throw in those guys, throw in a Hustadinov, throw in a Urov, throw in an Ogren into that mix of 9 forwards, I think it's...
And then you know what happened with Coyle, Niederreiter, Granlund, and Zucker? They were stuck behind Stahl and Koivu and all these guys. They never got that ceiling. My point is, give them the ceiling now. Let them play.
Right, but none of them are here.
But they're gonna be, and now you've just locked them out.
I don't think you've locked them out.
I'm just saying that you just talked about the previous core of the guys that they never got to hit that ceiling because they were behind Parise and Suter and Koivu and all these guys. I also think they didn't. And I'm just saying I could see them doing this again.
Yeah, but I don't think.
Don't you want these guys playing number 1 power play? I do, but
only if they're better than Eriksson Ek, Kaprizov, and Boldy.
Yeah. Well, if they have 2 shitty years in a row coming up. They'll get plenty of chance to play first line left wing over when Kaprizov's playing in Florida or
But you're
Vegas.
making my point is, that's a different argument, different story. What I'm saying is that last group never had guys that could take it to the next level on the top end of the roster. They never had it. Parise was a really good goal scorer. He's not Kirill Kaprizov.
Right.
He wasn't a game-changing electric scorer. He was a volume guy that has had an unbelievable career. Should be a Hall of Fame guy, a highly respected career. But he wasn't a game changer like Kaprizov. He just wasn't. And so when you look at these guys, I'm saying that none of that last core of players ever played at a level where they supplanted the guys above them. Charlie Coyle never outplayed Mikko Koivu while he was here. And if these young guys come up here now, you're talking.
It's hard to outplay guys when you're trapped behind them. That's my point. But you're about to do it again.
I don't think they are.
That is my point.
I think it's 2 totally different scenarios because number 1, I think the players that are at the top end of this roster are different players.
Yeah,
Kaprizov and Boldy are better than any of those wingers from that last regime.
They're
get it. Different.
Are they better than Hartman and Foligno? Yes. But that's my point. The young guys
Yeah.
are going to be
And
trapped behind those guys.
I don't think so. I think there are spots in the top 9 for all of those guys. And if the guys that they could be trapped behind are the guys like Kaprizov and Boldy. And if they're not better than them, they should be trapped behind them. But if they're, let's just say, for example, throw those 3 young players, the top 3 forward prospects, Hustadinov, Yurov, Ogren. We can agree those are probably the top 3 coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
If those 3 guys are all on your second power play group and they don't outplay Kaprizov, Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy to demand more, well, then that's okay.
No.
That's your second group. It doesn't mean that their upward mobility is limited and therefore their growth is stunted. It just means there are great players in front of them. And they can be the next. That's why I'm saying I think this roster has a chance to be different if those guys turn out to be what we think they are. And if they're not, then you're going to be fighting the same battle again, trying to fill your roster with veteran
I've been doing
guys.
it for 19 years, watching the same team.
But if those
and I
guys,
think the fans are tired of it too.
But
like there just comes a point you got to redo it.
But
that's my only point.
But
and this
guys,
is their chance.
This is different because of the guys at the top. You've never had these superstars before.
All right. Those aren't the guys that were just re-signed for 4-year deals and no moves.
That's why this roster is different.
I'm just so far they haven't proven
And so if throw your roster with those young guys in there. Who's going to be your third line?
By the way, it was Anthony that told me he didn't want to make this a long podcast.
Yeah.
So we were actually at the point that you wanted to end it.
When we should, because we'll wrap this all up with another show after the trade deadline when
March
everything's
13th.
done and everything settles down. But today we were just talking. I just don't think that you have there. I don't agree at all with the philosophy that you block the path of players. If players are good enough,
it's not even just blocking. Maybe I'm not articulating it well. My point is that we have watched the same story every single year, and Billy fell in love with players that he loves, but that have so far achieved nothing, and that they were in a cycle where those were the guys that could have been reset. I don't want Foligno to go anywhere. I don't want Zuccarello to go anywhere. I don't want Hartman to go anywhere. But when you re-sign all 3 at once, what it tells you is that you're just going to roll it back. And now trading Duhaime for a third, you are coming back with the same team next year. So you are praying to God that Spurgeon's healthy and that this season was completely thrown away because of 100% health. And I'm not convinced that it has. Well, there have been a lot of underachievers in this lineup that have been in the lineup every single game. Goudreau, Hartman, there are a lot of them. You can't say Foligno, he's had a good year.
Yeah,
but Zucchi since mid-December has done pretty much very little.
Yeah, very little, but you're still talking about a guy with 50 points and most of the time when his production has waned, it's when he's not playing with Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the point I'm making with it is we don't know yet that this team can't succeed as it's built because they have yet to go into a playoff where they're not $14 million short of the opponent. That's different. That's different than the previous era that had reached their ceiling. So we'll see.
So 2 years from now, when these guys are 2 years older and they're without the 14.7, we'll see if they are somehow miraculously better players than they've shown this year. That's my only point. You know what I mean? Like that's my only issue. It's like if we're just waiting for the 14.7, then we've just 2 years are gone.
But that there is a roster turnover that comes with that because these 3 guys you're talking about will all likely be here at that point.
We do have a lot more to talk about, but here's a word from our sponsors. Gear up for an incredible 2024 with Aquarius Home Services. Elevate your water quality with Kinetico, the ultimate water treatment system. Experience purified water with zero payment until 2025. Bid farewell to spotty dishes and rust stains and hello to softer hair and skin. Plus, marvel at the minimal salt usage. Act fast because this offer ends at the end of the month. And that's not all. It's also the perfect time to upgrade your HVAC system. Dive into comfort with a new high-efficiency heating and cooling system and pay nothing until next year. Act now. Financing offers are subject to credit approval. Trust Aquarius to keep you cozy and delighted all year long. Aquarius believes in earning the right to be recommended. They're just a click away at AquariusHomeservices.com. And don't forget to mention Russo sent you.
Hey everyone, Attorney Jerry Bosch here with Bosch Law Firm and WorkCompExperts.com. For almost 30 years, we've represented Minnesotans just like you all over the great state of Minnesota to guarantee they've been treated fairly and with respect when they've suffered a work-related injury. A work injury can change your life in an instant. You need someone on your side who can help you focus on getting back on your feet and getting paid while you do. You may be entitled to medical benefits, wage loss benefits, job placement, retraining, and payment for permanent disability. To make sure you are being paid all the work comp benefits you're entitled to, please call the attorneys at Bosch Law Firm. The call is always free, and there's never a fee unless we recover benefits on your behalf. Call 651-333-8300, Bosch Law Firm, or visit us at workcompexperts.com.
Back here, worst seats in the house, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from rainy Arizona, where the Wild just traded Brandon Duhaime to the Avalanche for a third-round pick. Let's talk about some of the other news and notes with this team here. You know what? Like where to go now? Let's talk about Philip Gustafson. Anthony, like, he has been the second best goalie for a large part of the season. Fleury, who's starting tonight against Arizona, is 5-2 in his last 7 with a 221 goals against and a 921 save percentage. But he has not been good. He hasn't been good for most of the year. They've had the second best goaltending on the ice for most of the year. Their save percentage in the third period is god awful. Do you see any way that the Wild would even consider trading him in the next day?
I would say unlikely in the next day, not impossible, but I would be really surprised if there weren't some discussions about that come the offseason. And Gus had a great 2-month run at the end of last season. He was playing in a low-pressure situation with a team that was essentially a lock to be in the playoffs, was making a run at winning the division. He took the reins as the number one guy, but it wasn't a clear-cut, you're playing 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4. I think he played 19 and Fleury played 13 down the stretch. It was about as low-pressure a spot as you could be in the NHL, and he thrived. And that shouldn't be overlooked. So you saw that, you know he's capable. This team's played with unbelievable structure in front of him all year. Even though they've had all the injuries on the blue line, they're still 5th in the league for the entire season in terms of 5-on-5 chances against. If this team had average goaltending this year, we'd be talking about a no-brainer playoff team. Their goaltending hasn't been good enough, and Gus has been a big reason for that. And I think because of that,
especially his last 10 starts.
Yeah, they've tried a few times, it's felt, to we think the only way you can make a run is if Gus is the guy. And every time he's had one good game where you've thought, okay, now maybe this is the start Edmonton, of something. Then the next one, he doesn't look sharp. And I don't know. I think we've seen enough to know that there's potential there, but we've also seen enough to make you wonder if he's ever a guy that could be a legit number one on a team making a deep run. So I think there are teams out there right now that if I were some of the other teams in the league, I'd be knocking on the door to say, hey, maybe with a fresh start and an injection of life, we could see this guy catch fire. Because there's some teams out there right now that have a legit chance to either get in or to make some noise in this year's playoffs that are hurting for goaltending.
It really would not shock me at all if Bill Guerin has had trade talks involving Gus, if for no other reason to set the table to what you just said, that at least you've now started to have an idea of what teams are interested in him going to this offseason. My gut says if they continue to plummet here, that we're going to see some Volstat starts the rest of the season just to see what they have in them, and then they can make a decision this offseason regarding Gus or re-signing Marc-Andre Fleury. But he's got to be better. We mentioned Connor Dewar. Dewar is somebody that I think they're having conversations with other teams about maybe trading in the next day. He's a Group 2 free agent with arb rights. And as we just said, they've got to open up some roster spots for who's not enough next year. Maybe Liam Ogren, Riley Heidt. Maybe they can get Danilo Urov signed. They continue to work at that. It's been tough in terms of negotiations and things like that. And obviously he's got the deal sitting and waiting in the KHL if he wants to re-sign there. But it would make sense that if they're going to move on from Dewar, that this might be the time to try to get an asset. The other one is Pat Maroon. Maroon is somebody that is started to skate. He's going to be back later this month. It could be like a Gus Nyquist type trade last year where the Wild got him. And he came, and frankly, don't you think he was their best forward in the playoffs?
Yeah, I thought he was really good. And a player the Wild would have loved to have kept. Somebody will take a shot at Maroon just because of his playoff experience.
New Jersey's one team that I thought was going to really probably trade for him, send the Wild a low pick or something. But they've sort of punted on, it feels like they've punted on the season. So now I'm not quite sure. Edmonton's a team that earlier this season wanted Maroon, but they've traded for Corey Perry since. So Don't know if that's still going on. But again, if you're a team that's just looking for depth and somebody that is looking to win a fourth Stanley Cup, and you know that you don't really need a roster spot for him until late March anyway, you might as well take a flyer on him and send a low pick or even future considerations. The Wild would probably do that just to give him a chance to play. Zach Bogosian re-signed 2 years, $2.5 million, $1.25 million a year, Anthony. I know that we both like him a lot. It does this, as Bill said to me yesterday, gives more time to the Damon Hunts of the world, the Jack Parrots, the Kyle Masters, the Carson Lamboses, Ryan O'Rourke's, players like that. What do you think of the signing?
Yeah, I like it a lot. And Bogosian's been a much better player than I ever thought he was when you just watched him once or twice a year playing for somebody else. He's a better skater, great guy, well respected inside the room. This is a great price, great value for him. And I really think if a lot of this comes back to how Jared Spurgeon returns, and let's assume that he returns healthy, and you start to look at what your defensive core could look like, and you put yourself in a spot where Faber and Brodin could be reunited, and that could be as good a shutdown line as there is in the NHL. You've got a potential second pair then that I've really liked what we've seen from Declan Chisholm so far, and I think you could have a spot where in some spots it's Chisholm, Spurgeon, and then your third set is Middleton and Bogosian. And maybe in a game where you're protecting a lead, maybe Middleton is with Spurge then. If you're trying to come from behind, it's more Chisholm and Spurgeon. But I think we've seen enough from him to be excited about a potential upside from Chisholm. And now if your third set is like Middleton and Bogosian, you really got something on that blue line, I think. And as we've found this year and have seen around the league, you got to have more than 6. You might have to have as many as 8 over the course of a season to really be competitive. And, maybe that's where those younger guys fit in.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those guys need more time. They clearly, Iowa struggled this year behind that young D. Wallstedt's actually performed quite well, and we'll see what happens down the road here with this blue line. Maybe what happens with John Merrill. They could stash him in the minors and get almost a full cap hit next year. Full one, like of his 1.2 million, I think 1.105 of it would be buried, and you could stash that if they want to go get have a 7th. I was talking to Dakota Murmis about his future today, and he's somebody that's technically a free agent that could be moved in the next day or so. He has proven this year to me that he is an NHL defenseman, depth defenseman, and he's going to probably earn a one-way contract, and that likely takes him out of re-signing with the Wild. Here's a word from some of our sponsors.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Make the switch to a Royal checking account and you'll also get real-time transaction alerts, free mobile check deposits, and surcharge-free access to over 40,000 ATMs across the U.S. Enjoy financial freedom with no minimum balance and no monthly fees when you switch to Royal's smart checking account. Learn more and open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
There are a lot of options to buy glasses out there. If you've been disappointed by high prices or poor online quality, check out our friends at Huxley Optical. I like Huxley for 2 reasons. First is the price. Simply put, I don't want to spend $800 on glasses. At Huxley, I know I'll get the same quality for half the price. They're a small independent business that is here to help you find glasses you love and save you money. Second is the service. They have options catered to what I need, and I know someone will be happy to help me find glasses. Whether it's a lens replacement, office glasses, or a brand new pair, they're always ready to help. Check out HuxleyEyewear.com. Again, that's HuxleyEyewear.com today, or go to their locations in Wayzata or Roseville. Tell them Russo sent you for 10% off your prescription purchase. Back to your worst seats in the house, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studio in room 1100, a very nice suite. I bet my room's nicer than yours, Anthony.
Yeah. Although my room's fine. You got to what the hell do I need in my room? I need a bed and a desk. And then I need a good gym, and I like to be walking distance from the rink.
Yeah.
And
what do you think of the gym?
The gym here is mediocre.
Yeah,
it's not my favorite. But
it's like you feel like you're in a closet.
Yeah. Normally in this town, my workout would be a run outside, but I had a little meniscus issue on an earlier trip this year that I still am not allowed to run outside. So the workout here was minimal, but we have a great gym in Denver. So I always just try to time my trips that way. But for me, we were just talking about this at the rink today. Hotels on the road for me, number one, it's the gym. Number two, it's the proximity to the rink. Number three, the beds are beds. But as long as I have a desk, because some hotels no longer give you a desk at which you can work, all I do is sleep. I don't need anything else in my room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it. It's nice to have this big suite, though, don't you think?
Well, I I don't know what I would have done with it except have to take a few more steps every time I leave the room.
Got the big pull-out couch, nice big giant desk here for board meetings. We can make trades, have fights about the wild future.
Right.
All sorts of fun stuff.
All right. Well, it's time to get to game prep.
Okay, yeah. Let me ask you about something we were watching last night. So we're gonna go to Colorado tomorrow. I texted with Zach Parisi today. By the way, we saw him both leave the ice. Super painful last night. He's not feeling great today, but he's healthy. The one guy that is healthy is Nathan MacKinnon. 31 consecutive home games with a point, Anthony. This guy is an absolute
he's a machine.
Freak of nature.
And I can't remember when we were talking about it, but we had the discussion, I think it was on one of these shows, about if I'm starting a franchise, he's the guy I take. And you can have McDavid, you can have Draisaitl. I'll take Nathan MacKinnon. The guy he's an absolute warrior. The motor with which he plays, every single shift, it feels like he's a threat to score. And if he doesn't score, he goes to the bench pissed off that he didn't score. And he's a tank. You can't knock him off pucks. He plays just as hard in his own zone as he does in the other zone. He back checks at the same pace that he forechecks. I love watching the guy. I have a ton of respect for him. And that big three of MacKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar, that's special. And that's why I think they still have – I think they've got a legit chance to be the team that represents the West, even though I think Dallas is deeper. I think Vegas, with their salary cap shenanigans, is going to wind up with a very deep roster.
I love how you keep on saying that.
I mean, it's legal, but it shouldn't be legal what they're doing. They're going to go into the playoffs with a team that's $20 million over the salary cap.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't
maybe
be allowed.
more, because I think they're about to get Gensel. I don't know. It doesn't feel like they got something else up there.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous, but whatever. That's the rules allow it. But I still think that big three, it's what Edmonton doesn't have. They don't have the third part. They have McDavid and Draisaitl, but they don't have the guy that's the game changer on the back end like Makar. When those three guys are on the ice together, it's hang on for dear life and hope somehow you get to the end of the shift without them scoring.
Yeah. A couple other things. I mentioned Foligno wants to play tomorrow in Colorado. He joked that he's going to mix it up with Dewy and can't wait to do that. But he said I asked him if he's going to fight him like he fought Ryan Reeves. He goes, there's other guys in this locker room that are going to get him more like Fleury from the bench. So maybe that prank war is not over with. Huznadinov got his work visa issued today being Thursday. And he's supposed to fly all day Friday, arrive in the Twin Cities on Friday. And if the Wild practice on Saturday, right now they're scheduled to, he could be on the ice after he gets his physical, all that stuff. We don't know how much he's been skating. So, Billy wants him to play right away. Who knows if that's Sunday right off the hop or if they wait for Tuesday, but we're going to see a lot of Murat Huznadinov. Jojo's injured. Isn't it funny? He always seems to be injured, Anthony. And the day we were talking in St. Louis, boy, it's interesting. He hasn't gotten hurt yet. Boom. Gone. Yeah,
it is too bad. He's had some bad luck throughout his career with injuries for sure, but he had stayed healthy this year, and I never did see the play on which he was injured. I just remember there was a shift in the first period where all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, Johansson's not on the ice. Look on the bench, he's not on the bench, and then saw him limping out of the locker room later that night. So it's too bad, and you hope that he is able to return fairly soon. When he was on at the end of last season, his skating ability was a game changer for Minnesota. It ignited that line, but we haven't seen that this year. Mm-hmm. Same kind of magic.
Does it concern you? And we'll wrap up here in a second, but doesn't this lately just seem like a one-line team? I mean, Capri
seem like it is.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean,
yeah.
All right, I was trying to be kind.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to say, all right, the second line, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, Gaudreau never scores. Duhaime never scored. Hartman's in the slump and a half. They just don't have any depth scoring where it just feels like if Eriksson Ek Kaprizov and Boldy are not on top of the game, they've got no shot.
Yeah.
We saw it again against San Jose the other night. They showed up, they were unbelievable, but against St. Louis, National, and Carolina, they got dried up and they didn't win.
You're talking about teams that have great checking lines. We saw it in Winnipeg with the Lowry line. They can neutralize those guys. You absolutely have to have secondary scoring. The Zuccarello and Rossi combo has created some opportunities, but they just haven't finished yet. And they have to. That line has to score. If this team's going to stay in this race down the stretch, that line, and it'll be Zuccarello with Rossi and Hartman for the next couple. Hartman and Zuccarello have had some chemistry together. I've really liked Marco Rossi's game, even though his scoring numbers haven't been anything crazy. I've really loved his game. He seems to be willing to go to the net, maybe as much or more than any other forward in the Wild lineup. He's so careful, so responsible with the puck coming out of his own zone, makes good decisions. But somebody on that line's got to score.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see it if Hartman gets a chance to play with those guys for a couple of games in a row, and we'll see something actually materialize from their possession. And because they have to have it. The bottom six, those guys, they're not scorers. I mean, anything they get is a bonus. I've liked how Lucchini and Lettieri have played together, but if you're waiting for those guys to score to carry your offense, you're in a world of hurt, as would any other team.
Yeah. Well, that's been in the last
you
couple.
need the Rossi line
and
to
in
score.
St. Louis, Nashville, Carolina, these guys have also taken very bad penalties that have cost them goals because the Wild can't kill penalties. And if you're never going to score, you can't be taking penalties, way away from your net and things like that. So they've got to be much, much better. One thing I did want to say, Kevin Pollock is one of the best refs in the league. Had a brutal injury the other night. I hear he tore his ACL, MCL, and PCL. It's going to end his career. Really awful that a referee as decorated as him doesn't get his swan song, his goodbye, and just has his career sort of end just like that. We saw that during the pandemic when guys like Dan O'Halloran, who I think is the most Stanley Cup Finals ever by a referee, his career just ended and no goodbye. So that sucks. One reason why I think officiating this year has been really inconsistent is they've had a lot of veterans hurt. Gord Dwyer has been gone a long time with a torn tricep. He's about to come back as well. But best of luck to Kevin Pollock, one of the best guys that I know in the officiating game, one of the best refs as well. Thanks for everybody for joining us here in the Aquarius Home Services studio on location in rainy Arizona. Our next live show is March 13th at 7 p.m. at Splitrocks. Come on down for a great special by Grainbelt and the Tuttle's Restaurants. Thanks to Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut Water Treatment Systems, Bosch Law Firm, Livia Weight Control Centers, Royal Credit Union, and Huxley Eyewear.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive a winner.
I bet my room's nicer than yours, Anthony.